So, I am going to be talking about wisdom, and I wanted to start off with the fact that I think there's kind of a connotation that wisdom is reserved for elders or, people that have been through these crazy life events. Although that is certainly helpful to wisdom and to developing the tools that make someone a wise person, there is no age requirement or age limit um, on wisdom or being wise. So, moving on from that, I want to kind of talk about the relationship between wisdom and positive psychology. And I want to kind of start with Martin Seligman, who we have talked about many times throughout the semester. And so he kind of has these three levels of happiness, which we have talked about a lot. So the first is the pleasurable life, chasing the next high, materialism, always having the new iPhone, always having the newest computer, that type of perpetual hedonic treadmill, type of thing where you're always chasing the next thing. The next level is a good life. So that is the passion, the flow, the engagement, losing yourself in your passions and your activities. And what we're going to be focusing on today more is the meaningful life. And this is where wisdom lies in relation to the other levels of happiness. The meaningful life is a higher purpose. It's being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And I think that, in a nutshell, is kind of what wisdom is. It's removing yourself from situations and looking at situation factors and emotions and critical thinking and putting it all together and stepping outside of yourself to find the greater good, the greater solution, the greater whatever the situation calls for. So I had an in-class activity, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I'm already running out of time. But what I was going to do in this in-class activity, I was first of all going to have people shout out people who they think are wise, and hopefully who they said would corroborate with my next slide, which has, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Jane Goodall, Martin Luther King Jr. On it. And then the next part of it, I was going to have kind of situation blurb shout out and have people look at, what could be extenuating factors in this situation, what kind of thought process would a wise person go through in order to come up with a solution. But for the sake of time and the fact that I don't have anybody here with me, I'm going to skip over that. So the next slide, I had already mentioned, it has Gandhi, Mother Teresa on it, but in the bottom left-hand corner, it also has my grandfather. And I was going to kind of go through this little anecdote about how, wise people aren't always these famous icons that society looks up to. There are people in your life that you look up to and you go to advice for, and you value their opinion, and they, have these staples that I'm going to talk about with wisdom, and they're able to make wise decisions. And so I guess my overall my takeaway there was the fact that, it's not always this crazy important person that is wise to you. So next I want to shift gears and kind of talk about the three spheres of wisdom. So the first being successful intelligence. So I think successful intelligence can kind of be summed up into critical thinking. It's, using the various parts of your brain to come up with a well-rounded conclusion. And it's, once again, looking beyond the situation itself. So it's, using your analytical thinking skills, your creative thinking skills, and your practical thinking skills to come up with the answer. And just one thing I wanted to mention, practical thinking, it's procedural. It's related to action. And it's not a part of thinking that we usually discuss, so just felt it should be mentioned. The next sphere of wisdom is emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence, I have 4 bullet points on there, but kind of what it breaks down to is, being able to correctly identify your own emotions and the emotions of others. It's being able to express both positive and negative emotions and to express them appropriately. The next part is kind of, harness this interaction between emotion and thought to, have effective problem solving. There needs to be a kind of flow and connection, I think, between emotional and cognitive thinking, but it's not something that comes natural. And I think, it's usually one overrides the other. But emotional intelligence is being able to pair those two things together. Understanding and labeling emotions, it's, to recognize the relationship between emotions and also to understand the causes and consequences of said emotions. And the last part is kind of emotion management. It's being able to reflect on emotions and disclose them appropriately. Alright, and the third sphere of wisdom is emotional intelligence plus. So these are, the values of truth and justice, the looking at situation factors, balancing short and long-term goals. And I think most of it is pretty self-explanatory. So with the values of truth and justice, it's fairness, honesty, righteousness. The next, considering others and decisions. That's, looking outside of the self-interest and self-bias. The next is balancing long and short-term interests, not only of the self, but of the group. Looking at situation factors, it's beyond the scope of, your one perspective. Awareness of humanity and uncertainties of living, it's empathy and compassion. And awareness of human differences. We're all different. We all think differently. We all experience emotion differently. So those are kind of the three spheres that make up wisdom, and they're the three things that are constantly, interacting with each other to facilitate the wise decision making. So next I want to talk about the balance theory of wisdom, which I actually found a lot of research on and I talked a lot about in my term paper. It's the balance of intrapersonal events, which are self-interest, interpersonal interests, which are the interests of others, and the extrapersonal interests, which are others' aspects in which one lives. So I think that, it kind of piggybacks off the bioecological model, which I'm learning about in a different psychology class. And it kind of shows repercussions of things on, a huge scale. So it's not only affecting you and your nuclear self or your nuclear family, but it also affects your friends, society, the community, and everything on this huge scale. And I think that, the balance theory of wisdom is similar. It's not only looking at yourself, it's looking at, your nuclear family, your friends, and then also on a community level, this would be the extrapersonal interest, how it affects your community, how it affects, your state, your town, your country type of thing. So another aspect of wisdom is individual wisdom. And this is, being able to make wise decisions in your individual life. These aren't, the types of decisions that affect your So wisdom actually starts with the self and the decisions that are made in one's own personal life. But all of these decisions are usually contingent on external factors that must be considered in order to make a wise choice. Excuse me. So a couple examples of this are A, picking a partner, and B, picking an occupation. So some of the external factors that could go into this are, the commitment level when picking a partner, your own commitment level to the relationship versus like their commitment level, where you're at where you're at in different stages of your life, and picking an occupation, it's emotional attachment. Is it something you're passionate about, or is it a practical decision? It's kind of these decisions in the individual life still utilize these principles of wisdom and the tools to kind of make these tough decisions that don't affect anyone but yourself. Okay. So next I want to talk about group wisdom, which was also a big topic in my paper. Group wisdom is the idea that wisdom is not a product of an individual, but rather a group of people in which ideal qualities are put together. Now, I want to talk about wisdom of crowds, which is different than group wisdom a little bit. So, wisdom of the crowd, first of all, what it is, it started because there was a crowd at a county fair and they guessed the weight of an ox correct. The individual guesses were all completely incorrect. So the takeaway from that is really that there is evidence that the median estimates of people who have no idea what's going on could be far more accurate than the estimate of experts. And so this can kind of relate to real practical life when, the principle is used. So individuals can apply this mechanism and improve their decisions in the decision making by averaging multiple perspectives from their own reasoning. So a couple other ways that this can attribute to everyday life is, stock markets, political elections, quiz shows, all different types of examples of how wisdom of the crowd can be used. So I just want to kind of bring it back to positive psychology. Wisdom is needed to attain a meaningful life. It's employing, unique strengths of the individual for a purpose that is greater than themselves, which I think is kind of, everybody wants to, make a difference. Everyone wants to have this meaningful life. And a way you can do that is to kind of get outside of yourself. Next is, it's used to make wise decisions that will ultimately enrich our lives and allow us to be happy. No one wants to make a haphazard decision that could affect the rest of their life in a negative way. But wisdom allows us to, make the decision. Next, using wisdom to positively connect and relate to those around you. So this kind of taps back into the emotional intelligence part of wisdom. It's emotion relation. It's being able to relate to those around you, those in your community, your family, your friends, being able to identify their emotions and your own emotions. And that also improves relationships in your life. So I want to end with what wisdom means to me. It's not some high and lofty, unattainable thing. Wisdom isn't just for Gandhi. We can all recall on the principles of wisdom and use them to create a better life for ourselves and others in the society. It's for our families. It's for our friends. It's for us. From here on out, I plan to strengthen my relationship between emotion and thought. I think that's something that I can really harness, and use in my own life. I don't really connect the two, I usually just let my emotions take over, and that sometimes gets me in trouble. I want to try to exhibit more emotional control and be more receptive to emotions of those around me. I want to be socially and emotionally intelligent. So I wanted to also kind of end with a note. I wanted to ask the class, what does wisdom mean to you? And how can you use wisdom in your everyday life? I wish I could ask all those questions. So that's kind of all I have. I'm going to attach the PowerPoint so you can follow along. And my reference page is the very last slide. Thank you.